Hi there everyone, Lars here with another Dungeons & Dragons discussion brought to you by Camille's Harem. Not just a podcast for novice writers by novice writers, but also a YouTube channel by novice writers for novice writers, because writing is an adventure, it's more fun with friends. And today I want to talk about something that I learned while playing a recent session of Dungeons & Dragons. It was a pretty intense session. I don't think it was meant to be this way, but it ended up becoming insane. And as one other person in our group said, it's kind of our come to Jesus moment, because within this campaign, I play as a dragonborn ranger whose entire village and family were wiped out. He doesn't know by whom or for what reason, and for all intents and purposes, he thinks he might just be the last dragonborn on Earth. So he's wandering around with another band of misfit characters, trying to find answers, if there are any to be had. And the Dungeon Master decided in this particular session to suddenly drop some hints about, well, what's been going on? Who might these people have been who attacked my character's village? And my character was out bar hopping with some of the other members of the party, so wasted and definitely not in their right minds, but suddenly filled with anger. We go on out, interrogate some soldiers, and find out who is responsible. So we go to pick up the rest of the gang, and we're like, okay, we are going to go and we are going to find the governor's son, because apparently he's one of the people who attacked the village. We are going to get answers once and for all. The non-drunk members of the party knocked out the rest of the party, tied us up, and threw us onto a barge to make sure that we would not implement our plan of attacking the governor's son. Well, when my character woke up and suddenly started piecing two and two together, got really angry at the party members who did this to him, and decided to just jump off the barge that we were on, swim to shore, and just head off in his own direction. What this led to is the party going in a three-way split, with my character wandering off to cool down to figure out if he was going to get revenge or what on earth he was going to do. He was just ticked. Meanwhile, you have a part of the party that's like, we gotta go get him because he's our friend. Woo! Then you have another part of the party's like, oh my gosh, we have to go save these morons. Woo! And then you have another part of the party that's like, don't you guys remember we have a quest that we're supposed to be doing? We're gonna do that. So, three-way split of the party. Things are insane. And this led to a very tense, about hour and a half's worth at the table of just characters tearing into each other, arguing, reasoning. You have all different kinds of philosophies, friendship discussions, characters trying to not go for revenge, characters getting ready to just knock the living daylights out of each other. A lot of things were going down. Now then, I will admit that I decided to metagame a little bit, because I'm like, okay then, at this point, we're in a three-way split. This is going to completely derail the game. My character is going to cool down and come on back. But this led still to a very great conversation between my character and one of the other characters, and then really between most of the party, as we talked about what our boundaries were, what we're going to do, and we figured out where we're going to go. At this point, the relationship within the party is very tense, and we're just going to have to see where the sessions take us. But one thing that I'm very happy about is that the Dungeon Master allowed us, as the players, to do this crazy thing and kind of go off the rails. Like, seriously, I was watching as the Dungeon Master was almost getting ready to, like, just sweat bullets. He's like, well, I have to now put all of these plans aside that I had for this session, and suddenly things are getting brought up from previous sessions as characters are getting angry with each other and are thinking about what they're going to do. Like, I have this item from like 6 sessions back, and the Dungeon Master's, oh crap, I gotta make sure that I know exactly what they're talking about right here. It was pretty intense, but it was an extremely rewarding experience as players, because things that our characters have been burying, not really addressing about each other, finally came out into the open. And by doing that, while things might be really intense for our party, I feel like the table came together in a way that you normally wouldn't get otherwise, with real honesty, real conversations, real role-playing, and this was all facilitated by the Dungeon Master letting the players do what they wanted to do for at least a little bit, and let them experience that. Now then, this brings up actually a way deeper conversation of when should the Dungeon Master step in to make sure that things just don't go too crazy, but also how much freedom should the Dungeon Master give the rest of the people at the table, because Dungeons & Dragons is a shared storytelling experience. If everyone doesn't have a chance to give their say within the story, then it's not a very enjoyable experience. It's then just one or two people playing the game and everyone else is along for the ride, and that gets boring. You don't want that to happen. You want everyone to have a chance to contribute and to have fun, hence a shared storytelling experience. But if you let things go off the rails, the Dungeon Master is then always scrambling to keep up with the players, and quite honestly, the story then just goes way overboard. You lose a sense of direction, and then the game becomes boring. You need to have direction, but you also need to have freedom within that direction. It's kind of like being set on a road. There's a fork in the road. You know that you have your choices, and that within those choices, you have various freedoms, but there is still a road to go down. And hopefully that picture, that metaphor, helps you to envision what I'm going for right here. Because I think that one of the best things that you can do within Dungeons & Dragons is this, especially if you are the Dungeon Master, is that you prepare your overarching campaign and story with its characters, and you make sure that you have critical choices along the way for players to make, for their characters to make. Yet you allow them to have the freedom to make whatever choices they want and to do whatever they want within those choices. You let them have that so they can have these experiences. This whole thing with the party breaking apart, then coming together and talking things over was not facilitated nor planned by the Dungeon Master. This was all the players doing, and that is beautiful and amazing, and it should happen. But the Dungeon Master also needs to be in control of the situation, to have that information at hand that the players will need for various choices, conversations, and encounters, but then also to say, okay then, so the players might decide to go off in this direction. I still have a campaign and a story going on. So based on what the players are doing with what they're making their characters do, what then can I do to then continue to encourage them, to remind them that there's this greater campaign at hand? What is happening in the world if they are involved or if they're not involved? This takes a lot of work, but it can be done, and it definitely develops a rich, rewarding experience. Now then, this immediately made me think about writing, because when you write, you should have an idea of what you want your characters to do, where you're going with your story, even if you're a discovery/garden writer, someone who is mostly discovering their story as they write it. You should know your characters, you should know what they would do within certain situations, and you kind of have an idea of where you're going. The thing is this, is that whether you are a discovery writer or you're an architect writer who plans everything on out, you need to still let your characters be themselves. You should never restrict your characters to the confines of the plot. Readers notice that when that happens. You want to make sure that there's plenty of your character's individuality, personality, and autonomy coming through. And what this can sometimes lead to is something very interesting. When you're writing a scene and you had an idea for this scene or for this chapter, but then as you are respecting the characters and letting them have their personality and their autonomy within the situation, suddenly things start happening. You get caught up in the dialogue. You get caught up in the thoughts. You then begin to realize, wait a second, no, this character might actually address this particular scenario, this particular situation, this way. And suddenly that puts you onto a different trajectory than what you had expected. Now then, for some writers, that drives them insane, and they absolutely hate that. I've come across many authors, both novice and established, who have said, no, you never let your characters do that. You never let your characters dictate the story, because then things get wonky and weird, and you lose all control. And yes, I can definitely see where that happens if you, as the creator, don't actually have control over your own story. And this brings me back to what I said about the Dungeon Master. The Dungeon Master should have an idea of what happens within their world, within their campaign, when their players interact with it or don't interact with it. And in fact, actually, sometimes the things that happen when players within a story decide not to interact with the world have massive consequences, meaning that they are not being proactive, and so like the villains or the antagonistic force has a chance to get ahead and really screw around with them. And this is something that I've tried to really bring on over into my own stories. This game of D&D just further reinforced this particular philosophy that I have when it comes to writing, that you are not just trying to put your characters along the road of the plot, but rather rather your characters are going through an experience and there's other forces happening within the world that will eventually have consequences on what is happening to your characters. This allows you to balance character autonomy with the demands of the plot. Now, I realize that this is some very high thinking right here, and I think that it would be really good to further illustrate this conversation by indeed actually having a full-on conversation with you in the comments and talking with other writers and D&D players and comparing and contrasting different experiences where players have gone off the rails, where characters and stories have gone off the rails, where things have not gone exactly as you had intended or planned, and then seen what the consequences were. This is honestly a great experience for us to see in real time what it means to give our characters autonomy at the board, at the table, and in our own stories. So let this kind of be like the beginnings of a deeper conversation right here, because this is a topic that is huge within the gaming community, and it is a topic that is also very uncomfortable for a lot of authors because of its various implications. So let this be the introduction to something bigger and better, and we will come back and talk about it more in the future. In the meantime, if you're looking for more writing advice, please check out our other videos here on our YouTube channel. You can also head on over to our podcast, Camille's Harem, found on Podbean, iTunes, Google Play, Spotify, the works. We have writing exercises for you to check out over at our Pinterest page, and of course, we would love for you to join our ever-growing community of novice authors. Links for all that and more are in the description below, and especially if you would like to support us, please check out our published works. Again, links for all of those books that you can buy and help to support us here at Camille's Harem are in the description. Thank you for joining us on this crazy adventure that we call writing, and until the next video, y'all, tschüss.